I don't like intros. I think they're a waste of a viewer's time, so I'll make this fast. I've been a fan of the Witcher series since about 2014. Not flexing, but it's just to let you know that I adore the world, the games, the story, and the characters. So, like many of you, I was really skeptical about this show. So that being said, I'm going to start with a short review for anyone also a little unsure of the series, to see if it's worth their time. And obviously, huge spoilers are ahead. Whether you plan on reading the books or watching the show for yourself, I probably would stop the video here. Unless, of course, you read the books, then you pretty much already know what's going to happen throughout the show. So the short answer is yes. I would watch this show. Most of the concerns I had were squashed in just the first episode. The first concern being this. This picture was the first look that we got as Henry Cavill as Geralt, and it did not look good. But, luckily, the final product is a much better and well-delivered Witcher. The voice he uses is a lot like Doug Cockle's, which I liked a lot, and he even said that he used a little bit as an influence, and was just as stoic and cold while still having great execution of sarcastic one-liners. All in all, his performance was actually one of my favorite parts about the show. But don't get me wrong, this will always be Geralt to me. Another concern I had was absolutely crushed in the first episode, and it was that Netflix would make the show too PG. This is by far one of the most brutal shows I've ever seen in a very long time. Whether it's Geralt killing a group of men in the streets or Nilfgaardian war fronts, they truly held nothing back. So they definitely get a gold star for that. A big concern that I knew a lot of people had was them PG-ifying the entire thing. But in more than just the violence, the show has not turned back at all. It's still very much the M-rated Witcher that we're familiar with. There were times that it really almost felt like a horror show, with the brutality and the atmosphere set by some of the monsters lurking in the shadows, which also kind of summarizes my opinion of the overall set and costume design. It's really authentic and it looks really good. And just about every actor and actress performs very well. I myself very much enjoyed Dandelion. Now, all this brown nosing being done with, there were some small gripes that I had. For starters, God, I really hate this stupid medallion, but I kind of digress. I told myself I wouldn't put any of my petty little jabs in here, but here we are, and I'm complaining about it. Also, why is Triss a brunette? The last episode of the series is the Battle of Sodden, and I know she loses all of her hair in this, but is it just gonna magically be red in the next season? Like, I don't know. Anyway. Now, in regards to the story aspect, which will be the meat and potatoes of this video. So, the Witcher book series is currently 8 books long, and 2 of these books are a collection of short stories, being Sword of Destiny and the first Witcher book, and probably the biggest source of the first half of the series of information, The Last Wish. Now, some of the people's concerns that I saw were that Netflix would try and cram too much into a few episodes, but being that they wanted to get really solid origin stories for all the characters, and The Last Wish doesn't have a lot of characters, the opposite actually occurred, where the show was challenged to do it themselves. Like Cahir, for example. He doesn't show up in the books for quite a while, but he's in pretty much the entire series. But I'll talk more about him later. He's probably one of the few characters that's affected most by Netflix kind of moving things around. Which kind of brings me to the point that some of the occurring events are not happening even close to each other on the timeline. For example, Yennefer was born in the year 1173, so her story would not be happening anywhere close to Ciri's, as Ciri was born in 1251, almost 80 years later. And the show never claims the opposite, but it's easy to imagine a first-time viewer being easily lost, or even someone who's familiar but just kind of thrown into it. So that being said, try and keep your bearings, or at least an open mind about where in time things are happening. Like I believe in the show, Triss meets Geralt before Yennefer, but that is not the case in the books at all. Just know that the events that are taking place when Sintra is on fire, or basically Ciri's timeline, is the newest events, or I guess you can call it the present. So like I said, the linear storyline doesn't actually begin until the novel Blood of Elves, which isn't any of the events that take place during the first season, but will likely be the events of the second one. So there's a lot of blanks that are filled in with the show. The show was given creative freedom, and no huge plot holes or contradictions to the lore that we currently have are created, which I really applaud a lot, at least none that have revealed themselves yet. Some things are altered, however, like Cahir, for example. In the books, Cahir is sent to capture Ciri by Emperor Muir in Sintra's siege, and his failure to do so gets him imprisoned for years. He doesn't have this big military presence that we see him having towards the end of the series. But in the books, the details of that night in Sintra aren't revealed until much later, when Geralt meets Cahir in person. Also, Yennefer. Kind of a small thing, but Yennefer wasn't sold by her father. She was, however, beaten, and she was also a hunchback, but he left them eventually, leaving her mother to carry on with the beating. There are also a bit of other differences, but after finishing the series, things are perfectly lined up to go straight into Blood of Elves. Much like the theme of the show that says people linked by destiny will always find each other, the same applies on the larger spectrum, where no matter how different the events may have taken place, Geralt and Ciri will always end up in the same place. Geralt may not have found Ciri in Brokilon, but they're together now. Yennefer may have burned hundreds of troops at Sodden, but there's still going to be 2 great wars with Nilfgaard. Cahir may be fighting for the side of Nilfgaard right now, but one day he will be at Geralt's side as a companion and a friend helping find Ciri. But from here, it's safe to assume that Geralt will be taking Ciri to Kaer Morhen, and her Witcher training will begin. The Witcher timeline is really interesting, because so many people started here, which is the ending of the story. And we now have video games, books, and a TV show that, instead of completely contradicting and ruining each other, are all working together so seamlessly to tell such a great story. It's really exciting for the future. Needless to say, I'm very interested to see where the show goes from here, and how they may differ things from the story in place, now that they will be following a full one, as opposed to several short stories. Either way, I was very pleasantly surprised with the results of the show, and I'll admit, I was very skeptical going into it, and you could probably say even a little pessimistic. I really didn't have high hopes for it, but I can happily say that I'm much more excited about the future of the series now, especially now that CD Projekt Red is going to be doing more games, and I'm sure we could be looking forward to more seasons of this in the future as well. And I'd very much like to hear what you think on the show as well. If you're a seasoned fan, feel free to share your thoughts below. I actually do care to hear them. And if you're new to the show as a whole and was just curious about what was different between the books and the show, I have synopses of the books on my channel. Yeah, I'm ashamed of myself for plugging, but I'm doing it. You can't stop me. Anyway, I think outros are pretty much an even bigger waste of time than intros, so I'm going to very crudely and unharmoniously end my